What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about the recent election in Hungary. So, I have to admit, like most Americans, I don't know much about European politics, let alone this Hungarian politics. But from what I've heard, this was a very, very significant election, and I just don't understand why. So today, I want to take a look at this video by TLDR News and, hopefully learn about what all of this means for Hungary and for Europe. So let's take a look.
After 16 years in power, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, the EU's longest-serving leader, is out.
16 years in power? I mean, I get that in Hungary, in a lot of other countries, you guys have like different forms of government and leadership. And in Hungary, you can have someone as the prime minister for 16 years. That's interesting, actually. Here in the US, we have a limit on how many years you can be president, which thank God for that right now, right? I think everyone's pretty thankful about that now. But on the other hand, if you can have a leader like remain in power for a very long time, like over a decade, that can be a good thing if they're amazing, if they're fantastic, if everyone loves them and you just want to keep them, I guess that's a good thing. So I don't know. I don't know this guy. He's obviously been the prime minister for a while. Did people like him? I don't know.
Opposition leader Peter Magyar's teaser party resoundingly defeated Orbán's Fidesz by securing a parliamentary supermajority at Sunday's election.
Okay.
Orbán's anti-EU populism failed to win over an electorate frustrated at high-level corruption, the cost of living, dysfunctional services, and Hungarian isolation on the continent.
What? I didn't know about all that. Maybe at some point people liked this guy, but it is pretty obvious they don't now, especially when you put it that way. Anti-EU? Is Hungary part of the EU? I actually don't know. I actually want to look that up. I feel like that's really important. Let me see if I can get this on my phone real quick. Is Hungary part of the EU? This says it joined the European Union in 2004. So yes, it is. But they're part of the EU, but he was anti-EU or making Hungary very isolationist. Along with it seems like kind of hurting the quality of life in Hungary. And okay, so now it's starting to make sense why he lost.
Orbán had the strong support of US President Donald Trump and was joined personally at a rally by Vice President J.D. Vance.
What? Oh, no wonder he lost. What? Really? I didn't know that. And I'm American, but I never heard Trump talking about Hungary. Maybe he did. I don't know. He had the support of Donald Trump. And so it's all becoming very clear now why the election went the way it did, I guess.
Who, somewhat ironically, accused the EU of one of the worst examples of foreign election interference he had ever seen. The EU actually stayed noticeably quiet during the election campaign, but it's no secret that the bloc was hoping for a Magyar victory, something confirmed by various leaders' jubilation at the results.
Oh. So European leaders are very happy about this result. Seems like a lot of people are happy about it. I've seen some headlines about this election, like popping up on social media and on like YouTube, and that's kind of what got me aware of this and interested. Because to me, it's like, it seems like a lot of people are really excited about this election result, and it's from my point of view, it's like, wow, this seems really important, but I do not understand what's going on here or why this is good or bad or what.
That the Hungarian election was so closely watched in Brussels, other European capitals, and the foreign press highlights just how much of an outsized role Hungary under Orban has played on the European stage, from its Ukraine-related vetoes to its fostering of a worldwide conservative movement. So, in this video, we're going to explain what the Hungarian election, Orban's decline, and the ascendancy of Peter Magyar means for Europe.
Peter Magyar? So that's the person who's currently, who is now the Prime Minister of Hungary. So was this like kind of an upset? Like, was this expected? Was this unexpected? I don't know. It seems like people are really happy regardless. And I had no idea that Hungary was kind of like suffering from this like anti-EU isolationalist, like difficult kind of politics going on. I had no idea about this. So it sounds like this is a massive change. So that's interesting.
So perhaps the first thing to say is that, while Magyar will almost definitely represent an improvement on Orban from the EU's perspective, it's important to manage expectations here.
Okay.
Magyar is not some sort of Macron-esque European federalist, and positioned himself more as a sort of conservative nationalist during the election campaign.
Okay.
Moreover, even if he wanted to, Magyar wouldn't be able to transform Hungary's political orientation overnight. Orban has spent the best part of 2 decades engineering institutional capture, and undoing this will take time.
That's true, but at the same time, you got to admit, since the election result went this way, that shows that the people of Hungary are, at least a majority are ready for this kind of change. This sounds like I'm starting to understand this is a pretty massive change in Hungary. And I'm not exactly, at this point, I don't understand why this is so significant for the EU, or I understand that Hungary wasn't like really participating in the EU, even though, according to Google, Hungary is part of the EU. So that's a part of this that I need to maybe understand better. Something big that's going to change here.
To give just a couple of examples, the Constitutional Court is still stocked with Fidesz loyalists. The Budget Council retains veto power over any spending plan, and Orban and his cronies still wield a considerable influence in the Hungarian media, judiciary, and much of local government.
That's very true. I can understand that. Even though the old prime minister is out of power, out of the leadership position, there's so many more aspects to government and judges and media and that are still like very much present in Hungary, in Hungarian society. So that's going to take time if that's going to change.
The point we're trying to make is that Magyar is not an unconditional enthusiast of deeper European integration, and he'll be further constrained by Orban's lingering influence over Hungary's institutions.
Okay.
Nonetheless, there are a number of areas where Magyar will make an immediate difference.
Okay.
Most obviously, Magyar's victory is good news for Ukraine. As you probably already know, Orban was constantly vetoing and diluting European support for Ukraine or sanctions against Russia.
No, I know. I definitely did not know that. Really? Because I understand that in Europe, I'd say most people, by the sound of it, most countries are very much supportive of Ukraine, rightfully so, and against Russia, which is all great and stuff, but I didn't know that Hungary was like, this guy was like vetoing stuff that would have helped Ukraine and not sanctioning Russia? Really? Oh my God. Okay, I didn't know that.
Most recently, Orban had signalled he would veto a plan by the EU to use joint debt to fund a further 90 billion euros in financial aid for Ukraine,
Wow.
despite the fact that he'd already secured an exemption, meaning that Hungary wouldn't be involved in paying off any of this new debt.
So Hungary wasn't even going to be affected by this debt. And he still was against. He was just against supporting Ukraine? Is that right?
This would have been disastrous for Ukraine, which is due to essentially run out of money sometime in the next couple of months.
Sure.
While Magyar hasn't explicitly said he'll withdraw the veto, European policymakers are apparently confident that they can get him on board. Not least because
Wow.
Magyar has said he immediately wants to start negotiations with the European Commission over unblocking frozen EU funds.
So this is massive for Ukraine. If you're Ukrainian, you're loving this election result.
If this does happen, it'll pave the way for not just more aid for Ukraine, but also more joint debt, which will give the EU more fiscal firepower and probably ultimately encourage deeper integration.
Okay.
What's interesting here, by the way, is that when he first rose to political prominence, Magyar was very cautious on the issue of Ukraine, pushing back against the idea of fast-tracking Ukraine's EU accession and getting teaser members to abstain from key votes on Ukraine in the European Parliament.
Oh.
Moreover, as time's passed, Magyar has become, if not more enthusiastic in his support for Ukraine, then at least more enthusiastic in his criticism of Russia.
Oh, thank God. Okay. Yeah, I don't know much about this guy. It sounds like almost at the beginning he was trying to, like, I don't know for sure, but it seems like he's kind of easing his way in. Because it sounds like this guy is very different from the leadership that Hungary has had for 16 years. This is a pretty different person. So he kind of eased his way in, and now he's criticizing Russia and that stuff, so that's good.
Largely in reaction to Orban's attempt to center Ukraine during the election campaign. For context, Orban spent a lot of the campaign having a go at Ukraine. Among other things, he accused Ukraine of interfering in the election via a Kiev-Brussels-Berlin axis, interrupting Russian oil supplies to Hungary via the Druzhba pipeline, and even implied Kiev was behind a plot to blow up Hungary's gas infrastructure after 2 backpacks of explosives were found near the Serbian stretch of the Balkan Stream pipeline.
Oh my God. There is so much stuff happening in Europe that I have no idea about. And these are some pretty big accusations by the sound of it. Oh my God.
Orban was presumably hoping that, by centering Ukraine, he'd be able to turn voters' attention away from corruption issues and create some political distance between him and Magyar, painting Magyar as some sort of pro-war stooge, doing the bidding of Brussels. This strategy backfired. Magyar was instead able to frame Orban as a Russian stooge, especially after it emerged a couple of weeks ago that Orban's foreign minister was holding regular phone calls with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, and after Bloomberg leaked a phone call between Orban and Putin, where, somewhat embarrassingly, Orban offered to be the, quote, mouse to Putin's lion.
What? This was a phone call? Oh my God, no wonder he lost. Oh my God, that is so incriminating. That's so embarrassing. I'll be the... Oh my God. Oh my God. I didn't know about this. Imagine being the leader of a country and being like, I'll be the mouse to your lion. I know a lot of people would say Donald Trump has all but said that kind of stuff, but fair enough. But this guy literally said it. How embarrassing. Well, it's good that this came out, and man, this is like political suicide. Like no wonder this guy lost.
Something similar happened with the US as well. Magyar originally signalled he was open to working with the current US administration, but after JD Vance's visit to Hungary in the last days of the campaign, Magyar put out a pointed statement insisting that, quote, no foreign country may interfere in Hungarian elections. Hungarian history is not written in Washington, Moscow, or Brussels.
Wow. I like this guy. He seems to be like very pro-Hungary, like at the core. You know, I don't know all of his politics or really any of them, to be honest. Although it does sound like he's on the right side of a lot of these issues. Um, yeah, having Donald Trump and JD Vance come in, and that's not great timing. That's not a good look right now. I mean, I don't know what the sentiment is like in Hungary, but I would think that's not a good look in a lot of countries to have Trump and Vance supporting you. So that's even more. I'm starting to understand why this happened.
This all suggests that Magyar might be more receptive to European efforts at integration if they're framed as necessary to guarantee European sovereignty in the face of Russian or American influence. And finally, we're going to take a look at the political implications of Hungary's election on Europe.
Okay.
One of the most obvious points here is that Viktor Orban is no longer in a position to be the EU's bogeyman, and other European
Huh.
governments can no longer hide behind the Hungarian veto.
I didn't realize this guy was such a pain in the ass for the EU, or vetoing stuff and being the boogeyman. And I really, I'm not familiar with this guy. He seemed like he was a major pain for a lot of people, politically, depending on what your politics are, I suppose. Um, yeah, and now, so this is like, I also now understand why this is such a big upset. Why this is a big change. This is significant, not just for Hungary, but for the EU.
For instance, if Magyar does indeed drop the Hungarian veto on certain issues, will the likes of, say, Slovakia's Robert Fico be willing to stick his neck out to become the most prominent roadblock in the EU, with all the diplomatic risks that that brings?
Wow.
Furthermore, Magyar's victory, and the scale of his victory, is a massive slapdown of the Putin-friendly, Trump-aligned right-wing movement in Europe.
I
It shows
see.
that belligerence against Ukraine, which became a core feature of Orban's campaign in this election, and keeping strong ties with Putin can be a losing strategy.
As it should be, right? Unless I'm missing something here. I didn't know that there was a European country that was so vehemently against supporting Ukraine. I didn't know that. And at the same time, supportive of Russia to the point where he's having phone calls saying, I'll be your mouse. I, I didn't know about this.
Which might make other European politicians think twice before leaning further into this. It also says something about the value of alignment with and endorsement from Donald Trump. Trump dispatched Vice President JD Vance to Budapest in the final days of the campaign, where Vance rallied with Orban, who he described as a defender of Western civilization. In a further bid to boost Orban, Trump wrote on Truth Social ahead of the election that he was ready to use the full economic might of the United States to strengthen Hungary's economy. But this clearly fell flat, and the result serves as further evidence that Trump's backing is not a golden ticket.
Which, in this day and age, I'm actually kind of happy to see that. Like, I didn't know Donald Trump was such a big supporter of the former prime minister of Hungary. But now that I understand what the politics were like, and it makes complete sense. Of course, Trump supported that guy. So Trump is very, very upset that he lost. He's probably very upset at these election results, which makes me happy about these results.
And could, in fact, do more harm than good to a movement's electoral prospects. It's not unlikely, then, that other right-wing populist parties in Europe may seek to visibly distance themselves from Trump, Vance and co. Now, with stories like these filling...
Wow. This was fascinating. And so important. And it's just stuff that we don't hear about here in the United States. This isn't really in our news. This isn't stuff. Yeah. Well, actually, this specific headline I saw pop up a little bit. It's just that I had no idea what we were talking about. So getting all the details here with this channel, TLDR News, awesome. I understand so much more about this, why this is important, why this affects Europe, the US, the world. So glad I took a look at this. Very interesting. So yeah, I enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the election results in Hungary and what this means for Europe and all this stuff. That'd be cool to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, feel free to subscribe. for more. And until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.